Are you a limited company owner concerned about how to claim back your fuel costs? Wondering if you need to keep receipts? Well, all of these questions will be answered in this video. As a business accountant, my team and I spend all day, every day, helping business owners with their questions, their accounts and their business. And as a result, one of the most common questions we get asked around limited company expenses is, how do we deal with fuel receipts? Do I need to keep them? Can I have it? Can I claim it back? What's the best way? Well, in this video, I'm going to give you all the key points. So make sure to stay to the end so that you've got all the different scenarios covered, as it's a little bit of an in-depth one, and we'll go from there. But before we get into it, if you do enjoy this video, make sure to click the subscribe button below so you can be notified whenever we release other videos just like it. So let's get into the majority of the video. So before we get going, one of the things I want to lay out is a quick reminder that this video is all about limited companies. I'm going to presume now that you're a small limited company and that you're the owner and the director. So you're the shareholder, it's possible for you to take out dividends and you're the director. That's the majority of the situations that we get people asking us about, and this is the one I'm going to answer right now. The reason that's a key thing to understand is that the rules for sole traders and for self-employed are vastly different, so just bear that in mind. We're not talking about those. There's another video on the channel that you should check out for that question. Now, I'm also going to presume in the main that you're using your own car. You know, quite often this discussion pops up because we've already got a car on the drive and we want to know how tax efficiently we can get some tax relief on it and how we aren't going to get stung with additional taxes. And that's actually the crux of the issue. Quite often with, say, sole traders or with other expenses, what we're looking to do is secure a tax deduction for you. Because one of the main ways to get extra income into your pocket in terms of not selling without selling anything more is to reduce your tax bill. It's the quickest way to increase your income, decrease your tax bill. So normally we're interested in, how do I do that? How do I get the most amount of expenses against my tax? However, in this particular scenario, the tax law in question is generally the employee tax law, is probably the easiest way to say it. There's plenty of books there that it's all in, but effectively it's employee tax law. So you as the director, as an employee, are reimbursing yourself. So it's generally that tax law that's in play. Now, as a result, and many of these rules apply exactly the same to any of your team if you've got any. So it's worth thinking about if that's the case as well, and you're reimbursing them. So for multiple technical reasons, let's just say the tax deduction is not normally a problem when you're reimbursing fuel expenses that are for business journeys. And regardless of how it works, you'll see when we go through this, getting a tax deduction in the company is not normally the problem. The problem is doing what you're doing. Is it causing you a bigger tax bill either in the company or personally? And that's what we're going to look at. So the first rule really to understand is that commuting as a whole is actually disallowable from a tax-free perspective. So what we want to be able to do is make sure that you as the employee, as the director or any of your team get paid and reimbursed for this travel without paying tax and national insurance. Now, if you're paying for commuting journeys, they're not classed as business journeys. And I could do a whole other video. It would go on for hours about all the different tax law cases that have happened over the last couple of years and what's deductible, what counts as a business journey and all the rest of it for this tax-free allowance. And what I'd say to you is, don't worry about it. Just understand really that commuting is a problem. People with employment generally, you don't see them getting to write off their fuel bill to travel to work, and it's the same for you. So if you've got an office, like we're in an office here, I wouldn't get my home to office commuting. The same as if you've got a shop or something like that. It's a lot more detailed than that, but if you just bear anything that you feel like's commuting in mind, generally you reimbursing yourself for that is going to be an additional tax problem at some point. It's going to end up being your earnings most likely if you do that. So generally, in order to qualify for that tax-free and national insurance-free reimbursement, you're going to be wanting to travel to, say, temporary workplaces or between different sites or to a customer you wouldn't normally see, those kind of journeys. But it really does depend on your exact situations. If you've got something complicated going on, definitely check with your accountant or get some other advice on your situation as a whole, because it really does depend. So rule number 2, don't pay around some allowance. I think quite often people do, because they do it in their own personal finances, you think, well, I'm just going to forward myself 50 quid a month, 50 quid a month, that will 50 quid a week, whatever, depends how far you travel, and that will cover my petrol. Well, that's fine, but again, for technical reasons that I'm not going to go too deep into, that'll end up being taxed by tax and national insurance. There are some ways to get that tax and national insurance back and offset it, but it just creates extra work. You just don't need to do it, and it just gets a little bit messy. So bear that in mind, try and avoid the round sum allowance. Point number 3, it's not really a rule, but it's something to bear in mind, is just talking about how messy point number 2 could be if you did do round sum allowances. It is actually possible to get tax relief as an employee generally on business journeys by writing to HMRC or by doing it for your tax return. There's a number of methods of doing it. So the reason that would normally occur is if you're actually an employee at your job and you're doing these business journeys, your employer might be like, no, I'm not paying you for it. They don't have to, but you still can get the tax relief. And how you do that is contact HMRC, and they generally will put it in your tax code, or they'll give you a refund if the year's already gone, those kind of methods. So then with those kind of 3 points in mind, the fourth point, which is really the recommendation of how best to do this, is I would keep a mileage log. That's generally the way we see it for a user-owned vehicle. So you're the owner director, you've got a vehicle on the drive. For reasons, again, that we won't go into in this video, having it as a company car is likely to be inefficient unless it's electric in the 2021 year. Aside from that, it's likely that the best way to do this is to actually have it as a mileage allowance. And the way that works is HMRC publish approved mileage rates, and you can use those rates. And all you do is you keep a mileage log of your journeys. So you want to know where you went, what you did, what date it was on, dates are particularly important, and how many miles you did, and you can make a note of those. Your accountant will, or your bookkeeper will then input those into your books, and you can repay yourself. Or if you're doing it yourself, make sure you log it onto your software or in your spreadsheet or however you're keeping your records that you're owed that money. Whether you physically repay yourself is a different question, but either way you just want to log that in your software. Now the current rates at the time of recording this video in the 2021 tax year are 45p for the first 10,000 miles and then 25p for each mile thereafter. Now if you do the maths on a tank of petrol, that easily covers that, right? Like if you did it 45p for a tank of petrol, it's not costing you that for every mile that you're actually using. The reason that is because it's meant to take into the fact that it's your personal car, you've had to insure it, wear and tear, tyres, all the other things that are in there. So you don't get any extra relief for any other costs if you do the mileage in this way, but that's generally the most clean way to do it. And if you're looking to particularly to recoup just fuel, then actually it's a really good way of doing it because you'll easily recoup that. And again, from a limited company bookkeeping point of view, if you owed it and you haven't quite had the cash or you don't want to part with the cash in the bank, just make sure it's in your books and marked so it can go into your director's loan account. It's owed back to you at a later date. And as long as you stick below or at those rates, there's no other reporting requirements. A bit like a lot of things in this video, you can do what you want. You could pay yourself £100 a mile if you want, but there will be tax consequences to do it. So try and stick under this, not to cause yourself any other complications. Now it's outside the scope of this video, but one point I do want to make as just a reminder is when you're out and about, if you're on a business journey, it generally follows that any other expenses to do with the travel, so the mileage allowance, so let's say you're claiming mileage allowance because you're going overnight to visit a client, the food, the hotel, the parking, all these things are generally allowable and therefore reimbursable as well, but that's another video I'm sure, but just bear that in mind from a record point of view when you're out and about doing this. So that's the actual payment. So let's talk records. We've already talked about what you have to have in a mileage record, and that's really quite key. But one thing I do want to talk about is the actual paper receipts. So people hate that. They always say to us, you know, oh, do I need to keep all those receipts? And unfortunately, the answer really is yes. You don't necessarily need to keep them by paper. There's some fantastic apps that allow you to snap them. Things like Receipt Bank, HubDoc, Auto Entry, all these apps. A QuickBooks app itself will upload, if you're on QuickBooks Online, will upload a picture. There's loads of ways of doing this, but ultimately you don't need the actual paper, but you do need some receipt. And the reason I'd say you do need them is two reasons. One is proof of expenditure. So if the taxman ever wants to look at actually, are you doing these miles and everything, you've got something. It'd be rare, but it's possible. But if you're VAT registered and you want to claim the VAT back on that mileage, which is a possible one, and a lot of people don't know about, so if this is the first time you've heard this, yes, recapping, the mileage allowance, you can reclaim some of the VAT on those 45 and 25p miles. Check it out, Google it, you'll find out. There might even be a video on the channel by the time we've released this video, but that is possible, but a little bit complex. But you need to keep your receipts in order to do that. So please do make sure that you keep your receipts. And then generally, this, as we've said at the beginning, was very broad, very general. If you're interested in the exact requirements and the exact cans and can'ts do of this, HMRC have actually released some pretty good guidance on this. Just Google booklet 490. And you'll see it's now turned into a web page. It used to be a PDF that you used to download years ago as a big thick manual, but now it's a web page that you can click through that's updated. And you can see all the different things you can do and all the different reporting requirements. And I have put a link in the comments so you can have a look at that. So that's it. So if you're interested in more of these videos, make sure to click the subscribe button below. And if you found this useful, please do share it with your network and your colleagues. And we'll see you on the next one.